than it's getting today.
Thank you. Senator Clinton, is too much of the federal budget going to entitlements? Too much of the federal budget? I mean, so how do we change entitlements for the future so we keep the promises made to Americans living today? And if it's not a problem, in your view, tell us why not. 1 minute, please.
Well, it is a problem. It's a particular problem with Medicare, where we have a very immediate set of challenges. It's a longer-term problem with Social Security. We have to deal with both. Part of that is getting back to fiscal responsibility. Part of it is reforming government programs. You know, Medicare is especially vulnerable because the costs are going up so quickly. That's why we do need to give Medicare the right to negotiate for lower drug prices with the drug companies. That's why we need to rein in the excess payments to the HMOs. They're getting paid $1,000 more per patient than what your doctor would get just being on a personal relationship with you. We've got to have a health care reform like the one that I have proposed, the American Health Choices Plan, that will bring costs down. I have very aggressive cost reduction measures. That will help Medicare. And with respect to Social Security, I think that the best way we're going to deal with the long-term challenges is when I'm president, to convene a bipartisan commission, because Republicans and Democrats are going to have to agree to make the changes that are necessary.
Thank you. Senator Biden, would you answer that too for 1 minute?
Yes. Entitlements will be a problem if we don't act. But the solutions are within our capacity. Social Security is an entitlement program. By lifting the cap on Social Security, it'll be solvent as long as any young person in this auditorium, no matter how young they are, number one. Number two, Hillary touched the points about Medicare. Medicare, in fact, it's cost. It's not new benefits, it's cost. And the whole idea there is that the combination of the $10 billion we're overpaying HMOs a year, the combination of prescription drug costs being able to be negotiated by the federal government for Medicare, and the combination of modernizing the system so you deal with chronic disease and others, which it's estimated we could save over $100 billion a year in Medicare. If we made all these modernizations and changes. So it is within our capability to do it. The question is, you got to act. And this is all about action. And I think they're totally within our capacity to do both of those things.
I'm going to let Senator Obama and Governor Richardson answer this. 30 seconds, please, and then we need to move on.
Well, just to emphasize how important prevention and cost savings can be in the Medicare system. It's estimated if we went back to the obesity rates that existed in 1980, that would save the Medicare system $1 trillion. So many of the reforms that I've suggested in my health care plan will reduce costs, not just for the overall system, but also for Medicare. But one thing I have to say, we are not going to make some of these changes unless we change how business is done in Washington. The reason that we can't negotiate for prescription drugs under the Medicare prescription drug plan is because the drug companies specifically sought and obtained a provision in that bill that prevented us from doing it.
Thank you.
And unless we change that politics, we're going to continue to see the waste that we're seeing in the entitlement programs.
Governor?
I believe universal health care is a human right for every American. And 1/3 of all of our health care budget, $2.2 trillion, 1/3 of that goes to administration and bureaucracy, failure to have electronic records. That has to shift to direct care. But prevention is going to be the key. You mentioned Medicare. 33% of Medicare costs are today related to diabetes. We got to have an elimination, as I did in New Mexico, of junk food in schools. We need to have mandatory phys ed. We have to be a country that does more research on stem cell research, on autism, on heart disease, on chronic diseases, on cancer. We spent $6 billion of cancer this year, in 1 year. That's 2 weeks of the Iraq War. That shows the misguided priorities that we have in this country.
Thank you, Governor. Periodically throughout the debate today, we're going to give each of the candidates 30 seconds to make a free, open statement. The campaigns drew for the order of these statements, and we're going to hear from the first two candidates now, Senator Obama and then Senator Edwards.
Thank you, Carolyn. 40 years ago, Dr. King challenged America to act on what he called the fierce urgency of now. And I feel that urgency today. Our nation's at war, the planet's in peril, and Americans and Iowans are working harder and harder just to keep pace. Now, I am confident that we can meet these challenges. I believe we can provide better economic security, that we can restore our standing in the world, and that we can make sure that our children have a brighter future, but we can only do it if we have the courage to change. If we can bring the country together, if we can push back against the special interests, and if we level with the American people about how we're going to solve our problems. That's the kind of campaign I've tried to run, and that's the kind of president I intend to be. I ask that all of you caucus for me.
Thank you. Senator Edwards.
So much at stake in this election. You know, what makes America America is at stake. Jobs, the middle class, health care, preserving the environment and the world for future generations. But all those things are at risk. And why are they at risk? Because of corporate power and corporate greed in Washington, D.C. And we have to take them on. They can't make a deal with them. You can't hope that they're going to go away. You have to actually be willing to fight. And I want every caucus goer to know I've been fighting these people and winning my entire life. And if we do this together, rise up together, we can actually make absolutely certain, starting here in Iowa, that we make this country better than we left it.
Thank you.
Leave it better than we started. Whatever. Translations.
We all knew what you meant.
I thought you did.
Thank you. Well, I want to come back to some other issues affecting the American economy. You'll have 45 seconds to answer these. Some of our big trading partners commit human rights violations. Considering that poverty and abuse are also often blamed for fostering terrorism, how should we alter trading policies with these countries? Senator Biden?
We should hold them accountable. Every new trade agreement, and I've voted against them all since CAFTA, including CAFTA, every new trade agreement should have built into it whatever we all talk about. We talk about environmental standards and labor standards, but we talk about it in terms of preserving jobs here, which is important. But it's also about human rights. How are we possibly helping a third world country, a developing country, by signing an agreement with them, knowing that it's going to be they're going to exploit workers, they're going to exploit their own citizenry, either by polluting their lungs or their drinking water, and or putting them in a position where they're getting paid a couple bucks a week. So it should be a condition to every trade agreement that we engage in.
Governor Richardson?
Well, I believe that human rights is a fundamental tenet of American foreign policy and therefore trade policy, and I'm going to be very specific. What we need to do is impose trade sanctions when a country violates human rights and doesn't hold elections, as we should be doing and we're doing in Burma, as we're doing in Sudan, as we probably should consider doing with China. But also, I think in any future trade agreement, we've got to specify that every nation that we trade with and have a trade agreement has to follow international core labor standards, no child labor, no slave labor, the right for freedom of assembly, collective bargaining, the opportunity to make sure that there's job safety, that there's some kind of wage parity too, and also environmental protection, air quality standards. This is what's important. These are our values. We have to transmit our democratic values of equality and freedom and human rights when it comes to our trade policy, when it comes to our national security policy, and when it comes with us doing business abroad to promote American trade and exports and get more jobs for our people.
Senator Dodd?
Well, I go back, and again, talking time, the Harkin Amendment, adopted a number of years ago, back when we thought human rights in the Carter administration had some value. He was a strong supporter of it then. Then we walked away from it. We paid a price for it. Too often people identify and think that human rights and security are composing interests here. They're actually the same interest. Our job is, of course, to advance the security of our country. We do it in no better and stronger fashion than by talking about these universal rights which we embrace in this country here. So it ought to be part of the seamless conduct of our foreign policy, not on some ad hoc basis where we apply it one place but not another. It needs to be understood at the very beginning, from my presidency here, that if you're going to do business with the United States, human rights is fundamentally important. We care about it, the world cares about it, and that's one way to enhance our reputation, restore our footing in moral authority in the world here, by insisting that this be a part of that seamless conduct of the nation's foreign policy.
I feel like I still owe Senator Edwards some time here in the mix here, so if you want to take this on, and then I think we're going to move on, and the rest of you will have a chance here in a couple of minutes.
Well, what I would say is human rights should be central to the way America engages with the rest of the world, should be central to our trade policy. But if you look at what's happened with American trade policy, you asked about China a few minutes ago. Look at what America got. Big corporations made a lot of money, or are continuing to make a lot of money in China. But what did America get in return? We got millions of dangerous Chinese toys. We lost millions of jobs. And right here in Iowa, the Maytag plant in Newton closed. A guy named Doug Bishop, who I got to know very well, had worked in that plant, and his family had worked in that plant literally for generations. And his job is now gone. The same thing, by the way, happened in the plant that my father worked in when I was growing up. It is so important that we stop allowing these corporate powers and corporate profits to run America's policy, whether it's trade policy, how we engage with China. This is not good for America. It's not good for American jobs, and it's not good for working people in this country.
And so a logical question, Senator Clinton, I'd like you to answer this. Should NAFTA be scrapped or changed?
Well, it should be changed.